Got digging through the past, crazy tales they uncover fast. History stranger than you think. They'll also talk about wieners in a blink. They'll talk about wieners in a blink. Oddball History.
Boom, boom, boom. How. Hey, welcome to the Oddball History Podcast. It's number 96. It's Rich Weirdos of Yore or Cavalcade of Rich Weirdos. Either one you like. Or Crazy Rich Crazy Guys or Lifestyles of the Rich and Insane. The point is, they're wealthy, crazy people from history. We got three of them. We got Lord Timothy Dexter, the brilliant dumbass of the Revolution era. We got Mad Jack Mytton, the British playboy with an undying love for crashing horse-drawn carriages, who blew a vast family fortune in like 15 years. And we have, of course, no discussion of Rich Weirdos would be complete without a little bit of Howard Hughes' old crazy ass. We're going to be getting into Howard Hughes and some of his greatest hits as a businessman and a legendary weirdo. Weirdo being the clinical term, of course, for obsessive compulsive disorder in his day. This is coming out Monday, May 18th, 2026. On May 18th in history in 1980, in 1980, Mount St. Helens erupts in southwest Washington state, killing 57 and devastating 210 square miles of wilderness. May 18th, 1910, the tail of Halley's Comet brushes the Earth, which causes a huge worldwide panic. Everyone assumes this is definitely the end of the world. What else could it mean? There are reports of businessmen in Korea and Japan going home from work to spend their final hours with their families. Kentucky coal miners seeking refuge from the certainly poisoned atmosphere down in their mines. And there were hucksters selling all kinds of merch. There were anti-comet pills, gas masks, of course, and then comet umbrellas. I'm assuming these were probably just regular umbrellas, but they're good for comets, though. But anyway, our old friend Camille Flammarion, if you remember him from episode 92, the turn of the century Mars craze, he did a lot to help fuel the madness in the wake of the Halley's Comet thing. He said that if the Earth had actually passed through the tail of the comet, the toxic gas might, quote, impregnate the atmosphere and possibly snuff out all life on the planet. So thank you, Flammarion. Always a pleasure running into you in the history books. And May 18th, 1952, the king of country, George Strait, is born in Petite, Texas. And that is all that has ever happened on May 18th in history. We have three exceedingly rich, unbelievably weird men to discuss. Before we do that, as always, it's top comments of the week on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe over there on YouTube if you don't already. The short about Commodus at Rosalind Galea 9883 said to be a fly on the wall when he heard both his title and his name ended up being synonymous with the shitter. It's funny and true. I like this comment because it made me think Commodus would not care for how we know him today, I think, which is mostly just from the movie Gladiator, you know? But he would not appreciate it. I don't think he'd care that he was portrayed as evil or like that he was always unsuccessfully trying to fuck his own sister all the time. I don't think he'd care about that. He would just be really upset that he was not portrayed as like a great gladiator. He would be like, what the fuck is do people not know have they not read the plaque about how I'm the only left-handed guy to ever conquer 12,000 men, I think it was? Has Ridley Scott not heard about my conquering of all the men? Thanks for the comment, Rosalind. We appreciate it. Next top comment comes from the episode itself on YouTube. The Suburban 15 asks, do you like movies about gladiators? I didn't answer online. I thought I'd save it for the episode, for suspense. And here it is. Sure. Yeah, I guess. I mean, I only really know the one, the one Gladiator movie, Gladiator, but I mean, it's cool. I like Gladiator, sure. But anyway, appreciate the comment. Our final top comment of the week comes from over on Instagram. Again, if you're not following already, give us a follow on Instagram too. Posting a lot of shit on our Instagram page. Hey, this is on the Instagram reel about Commodus slaughtering all the bears. Remember that? He opened a night of gladiator games by slaughtering 100 bears. But anyway, Mason Musso, our guy Mason Musso, lead singer for the band Social Order and formerly of Metro Station, shout out, welcome. He said, not very sportsmanlike of him, poor bears, and absolutely, Commodus, he was the worst. This would be, I can't overstate enough. This would be a terrible show. It would be really not fun to be at. But then also you don't want to get murdered by, Commodus's henchmen in the Praetorian Guard or whatever. So you can't, boo or anything. You have to be like, good on you, Commodus. I knew you could do it. Commodus. They said you couldn't, but I said you could. I said, Commodus, he's our man. He can do it every time. You remember that, lady? But anyway, that's it for top comments. Thanks as always for the comments. We appreciate every one of them, and the ones that we got that we didn't get to on the show. We love them all the same. Y'all are the best. Keep them coming. And with that, it's time for our Cavalcade of Rich Weirdos. First up, we have Timothy Dexter. He is born January 22nd, 1747 in Malden, Massachusetts. I was to be one great man, he once wrote. And in keeping with like his entire life story, he was kind of right. He sounded dumb, and yet he was kind of right, and that's like kind of his whole story. He comes from a family of farm laborers. At 16, he becomes an apprentice to a leather dresser. At 21, he goes into business on his own, making leather gloves and moose hide breeches. Does pretty well for himself, but his first real big come up is he gets married to a wealthy 32-year-old widow named Elizabeth Frothingham, who had actually been married to one of his leather associates before. She had a lot of money, both from the husband's estate as well as she was a door-to-door saleswoman. It said she sold random bullshit from door to door. I don't think it said random bullshit on the thing I read, but it was pretty close. It was like she sold a bunch of fucking nonsense but she had a lot of money from it, so she was good at it, I guess. But anyway, they move into a mansion in Charlestown, Massachusetts, heart of the leather district, and if I'm not mistaken, setting for the movie Slapshot with Paul Newman, the 70s movie Slapshot. Shout out to that movie. One thing about Dexter is he yearns for the reverence of the people, especially rich people, especially like the rich, fancy New England people who he's surrounded by. And of course, he'll never get it. He has no education. He's nearly illiterate. He has no pedigree, no education like all the other rich guys. And on top of that, he's completely insane. But he never stops trying. He wanted a public office. He thought that was one way he could get respectability. And he keeps petitioning the neighboring Malden, Massachusetts to let him have some government post. He's like, I don't care what, just give me something. Just let me be the head of something. He keeps writing them letters, and finally in 1776, after years of badgering, submitting these petitions to Malden, Massachusetts, they make him keeper of the deer. So basically his job was to be on the lookout if any deer wander into town. And if that's not clear enough that it was a big fuck off to him, it was said in the town records the last deer had disappeared from the Malden Woods 19 years before. So they were just like, yeah, just go look for deer. And he apparently he did. He took this job quite seriously. But it's also during the Revolution that Dexter makes his biggest score, his most legendary score. What happens is during the Revolutionary War, the fledgling federal government, the Continental Congress, you remember those guys, they keep issuing, they issue the country's first paper currency, and then they just keep pumping out more and more paper currency. And the merchants and the vendors of America are just aggressively not using any of this. Everyone's using like IOU notes. So pretty soon there's just an ocean of worthless Continental Congress money floating out there. People would even say stuff was not worth a Continental, which that meant it's not worth shit, you know? So Dexter starts buying up these shit notes. He starts buying all of them, all the worthless Continentals he can get his hand on, an insane seeming thing to do at the time, because of course it seemed very likely that the notes would never be honored, never have any value. But then the colonies win, and then in the 1790s, when the Constitution is ratified, it stipulates that the government would honor the notes at 1/8 value, while Massachusetts paid par value for their notes. So Dexter's fucking loaded now. Dexter comes into a ton of money. He builds a pair of merchant ships and sets up a shipping business that went to Europe and the West Indies. Somehow, probably someone trying to spite him. That's how a lot of Dexter's business ventures get started, is he's acting on a tip from someone who's trying to spite them because they hate him. They hate him because he's different and really insane and thinks a lot of himself. Somehow he gets the idea to ship bed warmers. I don't even know what the thinking was behind this, but to ship bed warmers, they were like these metal things with handles. I didn't know about them before, but they're like these metal things with handles, and you would put hot embers in them and then shove them under your mattress to keep your mattress warm in the cold New England winters. But he ships a load of no less than 42,000 of them to the West Indies, a terribly hot tropical climate. Again, an insane seeming thing to do, but the captain of his ship ends up selling them as ladles for use in the molasses industry, which is huge there, much bigger than warming beds, than bed warming tech. So they mark them up like a shit. They get way more for them as ladles than they would have as bed warmers. So again, Dexter gets richer. He, falls ass first into another fortune. Lord Timothy Dexter, that's his thing. He figures one insane nonsensical roll of the dice deserves another. He ships a bunch of wool mittens to the same place, the West Indies. It just so happens there's a ship in port there this time, and this ship is bound for Siberia. Those guys love mittens. Dexter wins again. He also scored by sending stray cats to the Caribbean, where they were in great need of a solution to their rat problem, and Bibles to the East Indies, where Christian missionaries had recently converted a bunch of people to Christianity, and these new native Christians needed Bibles, and they knew they needed Bibles because Dexter sent along a note with his captains telling them that they needed Bibles, as Dexter wrote, quote, "I sent a text that all of them must have one Bible in every family, or if not, they would go to hell." And there's like 5 misspelled words in that, but the message got home. It worked. He moved a lot of Bibles. That old business trick. Sell me this pen you need this pen or you will go to hell. Oldest trick in the book, classic maneuver here by Dexter, and it works. He moves a lot of Bibles. One time, some Weisenheimer decided to prank Dexter by telling him, you know what you should do is get some coal and ship it to Newcastle. See, it's funny because there's like a whole idiom about shipping coal to Newcastle. It's a very stupid thing to do. Why would you ship coal to Newcastle? Newcastle being like one of the coal capitals of the world. But so he, according to the story, he actually ships coal to Newcastle, and it happens to be during miners' strike. So once again, made a shitload of money. This is a lot of his career, is people trying to fuck him over, trying to spite him, and then accidentally just giving him really sound investment advice. Another time, Dexter made a bunch of money on whale bones. In some version of the story, he went around buying up whale bones, but in others, he just kind of had a bunch of whale bones lying around. It seemed like maybe I read he sold whale blubber at a point, so maybe leftovers from being in the whale blubber business, but he had a bunch of whale bones lying around, and it turns out, great stroke of luck, whalebone is the plastic of the 1800s. So bang, another fucking shitload of money for our man. He gets a reputation naturally after a while. Whenever he would go and want to buy something in bulk, they'd be like, well, what does this motherfucker know then? What's the deal? I know as soon as I sell this shit to him, it's going to go up. But then they would look at him and they'd be like, yeah, but then again, he really does seem like stupid as shit. And so I'm inclined to think he doesn't know what he's talking about. Even with all the numbers, in his favor, I'm still inclined to believe this guy is dumb as shit. Look at him over there. And then, but they would sell it to him, and then it would happen all over again. This article from historicipswich.net, that uses excerpts from the 1848 biography of our man, The Life of Lord Timothy Dexter, says, quote, shrewd merchants were suspicious of selling him an article, apprehensive that it was almost a sure sign that it was going to rise, although they could see no reason for it. Eventually, Dexter and his family moved to an even grander home up in Newburyport, a small, idyllic coastal town. Dexter tricks his new mansion out, fucking hard as shit, like an early day exhibit. He adds minarets, a golden eagle on the cupola. Also had a mausoleum for himself built there, and that was like his favorite part to show. He loved showing off his mausoleum. He was like, check this is bitchin' mausoleum. That was his favorite part of the tour. And then the other favorite part of the tour, I imagine, he had 40 giant wooden statues of various American heroes and other figures from history, philosophers, and revolutionary heroes like Washington, Jefferson, William Pitt, and of course himself, Timothy Dexter. He was the last one. Knapp wrote in 1848, the tasteless owner in his rage for notoriety created rows of columns 15 feet high at least, on which to place colossal statues carved in wood. Directly in front of the door of the house, on a Roman arch of great beauty and taste, stood General Washington in his military garb. On his left was Jefferson, on his right Adams. On the columns in the garden there were figures of Indian chiefs, military generals, philosophers, politicians, statesmen, and the goddess of fame and liberty. Also, there was a little plaque on Dexter's statue that said, I am the first in the East, the first in the West, and the greatest philosopher in the Western world. Despite having never read any philosophy, he was just giving himself the number one spot of all time. Dexter also buys a home in Chester, New Hampshire, and starts calling himself Lord Chester, and he'd give any children who called him Lord Chester a quarter, which was the equivalent of $5 now, and if an adult addressed him as Lord Chester, he'd buy them dinner and drinks. One reason Timothy Dexter struggled so greatly to gain the love and esteem that he so desperately wanted was because that he was a contentious, off-putting lunatic. One point, he told his neighbors that his wife had died, and when they're like, "What are you talking about? We just saw your wife in the gardening," and he was like, that's her ghost. That's just her ghost." Another time at his mansion, a painter had inscribed, he was always having the inscriptions in his statue garden repainted. And one time, a painter had inscribed the Thomas Jefferson statue with the words Declaration of Independence. Dexter saw it and demanded that he change it to Constitution, which of course is wrong. That's not Jefferson's deal. His deal is the Declaration of Independence. So the painter was like, "You're wrong. His deal is the Declaration of Independence." And so Dexter went and got his long rifle, fired a shot at the guy, and said, "Constitution." So he did win that argument. Maybe Dexter's most insane stunt of all was one time he threw a fake funeral for himself. He got his whole family to go along with it, including his wife, who by now had moved out of the mansion out of embarrassment for how insane her husband was. And how it was reflected in their home. But she's in on it, as well as their two children. He throws himself this fake funeral, and then he hides under a floor. He's like watching from like under a floorboard, I believe. He's watching his own funeral, and then at one point, all the guests, they hear a great commotion in the kitchen, and they come in there. And remember, they're at Timothy Dexter's funeral. They come into the kitchen, this great commotion, and Timothy Dexter is beating his wife with a cane because she wasn't crying enough at his funeral. A real piece of shit, Timothy Dexter. He has a big shit-eating grin on his face when they catch him there, and then he just joins the party as if nothing happened, as if they're not like at his funeral. A couple years before his death, Dexter writes his masterpiece, the great book that he always felt he had in him, if only he could get past his illiteracy, which he kind of does. It's predictably insane. It's for a book. I mean, it's written by a crazy man who is nearly illiterate. It's called A Pickle for the Knowing Ones, or Plain Truths in a Homespun Dress. A Pickle for the Knowing Ones. All right. And there's no punctuation. Dexter misspells pretty much everything, including the name of his hero, George Washington, whose name he spells Jorge Washington. But the book did well enough to warrant a second printing, and in the second printing, Dexter, kind of a funny bit, he included a page filled with punctuation marks at the end and invited readers to use them to pepper and salt it as they please, except for the way he spelled it was like peeper and salt it as they pless. That's Lord Timothy Dexter. He dies a couple years later, but goes down, as one of the great all-time weirdos in American history, especially for his time period. All the other biographies of, the other guys you read about during revolutionary times, they're all so serious. They're never doing things like throwing fake funerals for themselves. But our second guy in our cavalcade of rich weirdos is Mad Jack Mytton. He's a British squire, born 1796 in Halston Hall, Whittington, in Shropshire, England. John Mytton, he comes from a family of squires. They were like the armor bearers, of knights. If you've seen Game of Thrones, you know about squires. Weren't there squires in Game of Thrones? They were just kind of like the assistants to knights, So I don't know what squires were really doing in like the late, 18th, early 19th century. I don't think were there knights still? I don't know. I didn't look into it. But anyway, when Mad Jack is 2 years old, his father dies in a squiring accident, presumably, and he inherits the family estate, which sits on 132,000 acres spread across Shropshire and Wales, which itself is worth £6.7 million in 2026 money. And then it comes with an annual income of about $1.1 million from rental and agricultural assets. So he comes into that when he's 2 years old. And it doesn't take John long to become Mad Jack. He doesn't spend a lot of time as John Mytton. He becomes Mad Jack Mytton really early. He was kicked out of his first school for fighting a teacher, kicked out of his second school after 3 semesters for reasons unknown, and then being rich as hell, he was just taught by a series of private tutors, a la Jack in the movie Jack, that Mad Jack delighted in torturing. He loved tormenting these tutors. One time, he put a horse in a guy's bedroom. That was his big prank. The guy found a horse in his bedroom. Classic Mytton. He loved horse-related hijinks, as we'll see. Despite his presumably incomplete schooling and complete lack of interest in education, he's accepted to Cambridge. He did it, which is the wealthy kid finally won one, you guys. There's a story that claims he shows up at Cambridge in January 1816 with over 2,000 bottles of port, but it's more likely that he never showed up at all. He certainly didn't get a degree of any kind. By this point, he was already mostly just interested in horse racing. He was into picking the ponies. From Cambridge, he goes, like I said, on the Grand Tour, and then when he returns, he joins the army, ends up with the 7th Queen's Own Hussars. Spent time in France with an occupying force after the defeat of Napoleon, but he's still spending all his time getting hammered and gambling mostly. That's his great loves, getting hammered and gambling. Eventually, he resigns his commission and returns to Shropshire, where he rejoined the North Shropshire Yeomanry, where he made it as far as major, despite lobbying for a better rank after an uncle of his retired. He was just like, give me his old job. And they were like, it doesn't really work that way. Around 1816, Mytton returns to his country seat and starts learning the art of squiring in preparation for coming into his full inheritance at 21. But of course, still, his main things are getting drunk and raising hell. He's like a Regency-era Duke of Hazzard. He loved reckless driving. That was like his third love after getting hammered and gambling. He loved reckless driving. At the time, of course, this meant horse-drawn reckless driving. He lived his life a quarter mile at a time. Mad Jack Mytton. He actually seemed to enjoy crashing into things, both in carriages and just on horseback. Once on a hunt, he got bored and decided to run his horse at a gallop over a rabbit warren to see if it would collapse. It did, and he broke 3 ribs. No word on what happened to the horse, but probably not great. Another time, he's out on a tandem, a cart drawn by 2 horses, one in front of the other. I looked it up. They're just in single file, one in front of the other. And he decided to see if he could jump a rail with this thing, and the first horse makes it. The second horse, of course, he's in a real bad position, and so the second horse, the cart is demolished. The second horse, presumably, again, is real fucked up. I didn't read anything about specifics. I didn't read anything that had that, and I'm glad, frankly. That would have been a terrible read. Justice for horse number 2, but both he and Mytton get all fucked up in that crash. The carriage is demolished on the gate. Another time, Mytton was riding around in a gig, which is like a fast, light, horse-drawn vehicle, and he's riding around with another guy. He asks him if he's ever been, quote, much hurt by being upset in a gig. And the guy said, no. Wrong answer, pal. You should have been like, yeah, so many times. I wouldn't even, so many times already. I don't need to experience that. He probably would have done it anyway, but when the guy said no, Mytton, Mad Jack Mytton, he drove the horse up an embankment, causing he and this poor idiot who fell right into his trap to fly out of the gig. Hilarious. He was just a joke master, the Mad Jack Mytton. He loved practical jokes. Another one he liked to do, classic Jack Mytton, was he'd dress up as a highwayman and he'd fake rob acquaintances of his. One time he did it, and I read one time he did it, and it was like a elderly couple that I think had been at a dinner party that he had hosted, and then as a bit he dressed up as a highwayman and surprised them out on the road, and then chased them back to their home, to their house, all the way. Just a hilarious prank, just from a classic prankster, an Ashton Kutcher of yore, this Mad Jack Mytton. He was also an avid hunter, Mad Jack Mytton. From 1817 to 1821, he hunted 5 days a week on his own land at his own expense. He was always having his land stocked with all kinds of game for him to shoot. He kept 2,000 dogs, the favorites among which he would feed steak and champagne. He had a horse just living with him in his house like a dog, as well as a pet bear. No word on if they were unlikely animal friends. But I'm going to claim they were. There's nothing that said they were, but I think I can get that rumor started right here, right now. You heard it here first, folks. Jack Mytton's bear and horse were best friends. And sometimes the bear would ride the horse, and they would go on adventures sometimes together, a la, a bear and horse version of the film Homeward Bound. And I think that's great. I think that's one of my new favorite objective history facts, that Jack Mytton's bear and horse were friends. In another classic Jack Mytton prank, a friend of his passed out drunk at his house, and so Mad Jack Mytton put 2 bulldogs and his pet bear in bed with the guy. Which again, I mean, it's funny, but it could be edited. I feel like the bulldogs, once there's a bear in the bed, the bulldogs, it's kind of a hat on a hat by Jack Mytton. But not to critique the master here. He's the one who's revolutionizing the prank game by putting bears and bulldogs in guys' beds when they pass out drunk. In 1819, he decides to run for Parliament as a Tory, and by run I mean he offered voters £10 each, just straight up £10 each. Vote for me, give you £10 right now. And so he spends £10,000 and essentially bought the title of MP for Shrewsbury. And then he spends a total of 30 minutes in the House of Commons before he realizes Parliament sucks. It's not nearly as fun as the track. I would much rather be getting hammered over at the track. He makes it 30 minutes. Also, part of it wasn't his fault. He was deaf, Mad Jack Mytton. He was deaf, and they had no, allowances for that. There was no concerns for accessibility in Parliament at the time, and so he's like, you know what, I'm gonna take off. So it might have been that, but I gotta say, I mean, even if he could have understood everything that was going on, I mean, he wouldn't stay. What is he gonna stay, like an hour? He was gonna hit that point eventually where he just walks out. I mean, you can't really blame him when you think about his life is all, like I said, getting hammered at the track, getting hammered, going hunting. getting hammered and putting bulldogs in other drunks' beds when they pass out. He has a really fun life, and suddenly he's in the House of Commons. That sounds really terrible. It would be a real step down in terms of fun. When your life is tearing ass around Shropshire in a gig, making guys fly out, having a great time, that's not going to be a fun time. He says, fuck it, I'm done with politics forever. Y'all can keep it. But then a decade later in 1831, he did change his mind, decided to get back into politics again, this time running for one of the 2 seats from Shropshire, but withdraws on the 5th day of polling and came in last. Then he vows to come back in 1832, but by the time that election has come around, he has fled the country to escape his creditors. That's right, loaded ass Mad Jack Mytton, by 1830 was deeply in debt. He was spending money like nobody's business. By 1830, he had sold his unentailed estates in Shropshire, as well as the contents of Halston. In 1832, he sold his estate in Dinas Mawddwy, Wales, but that still wasn't enough to satisfy his debts, so he fled across the English Channel to Calais. It's while he's in Calais that he famously sets himself on fire to cure his hiccups. This is a real big Mad Jack Mytton story. His friend and biographer Charles James Apperley, who wrote under the pseudonym Nimrod, was there when it happened. And like a lot of his stories, Apperley makes a point of saying, look, this is going to sound really insane, and I get if you don't believe it, but I swear to God, I was here. I saw this crazy son of a bitch do this shit, and as a matter of fact, I'm not even including all the crazy shit that I saw him do, because y'all wouldn't even believe half the crazy shit that I saw him do. It would ruin my credibility. You'd think I was a crazy guy just from reporting what this crazy guy did. Or as he wrote, I might hazard an imputation on my veracity were I to recount all the extraordinary deeds of this most extraordinary man in various situations with hounds. Per historicuk.com, one of the most famous stories involved Mytton riding into his own drawing room on a bear which he kept at home. There's the bear again. He was dressed in a full hunting outfit, including spurs, with which he pricked the animal, which promptly and understandably turned round and bit his leg right through. Another time, they're hanging out, Apperley and Mytton saw a bunch of ducks across a frozen pond and took off out of the house butt-ass naked, running full speed across the frozen pond with a pistol, trying to shoot the ducks. This guy Apperley saw it all. One night he's, while they're hiding out from, while Mytton's hiding out from creditors in Calais, he's getting ready to go to bed, and he gets the hiccups. He says, damn this hiccup, but I'll frighten it away. And then he grabbed a candle and lit the tail of his nightshirt, his cotton nightshirt, which burst into flames. His servant and another guest beat out the flames, and Mytton, now wearing only a tattered, singed nightshirt, so basically nothing at all. He's basically butt-ass naked again. He falls back onto the bed and says, the hiccup is gone, by God. Eventually, Mytton returns to England, where he's immediately arrested and sent to debtor's prison. He gets out, but soon has to flee to France again. He's in and out of jail in France for fighting and debt. He's doing really bad, so some concerned party calls his mom. She brings him back to England, where he's thrown back into King's Bench Prison, where he dies March 29th, 1834, quote, worn out by too much foolishness, too much wretchedness, and too much brandy. He was 37. Shout out to you, Mad Jack Mytton. Our last crazy rich man is Howard Hughes, the aviator himself, the original Triple H. If his middle name started with H, I didn't look it up. The guy from the movie, The Aviator, the film producer, business magnate, one of the most influential people in the world for his era. He could be a whole episode, frankly, but we're just going to be focusing on his eccentricities here, on his foibles and his quirks and his peccadillos. Like how late in life he hired a sort of personal security team of all Mormon dudes because he thought they were more trustworthy than the Mormon Mafia. We'll be getting into them. He's born Christmas Eve 1905 in Houston, Texas. His father founded the Sharp Hughes Tool Company. He's out working as a traveling salesman for his company a bunch. So Howard, as a kid, spends a ton of time with his mom. His mom, she gives him all the attention a boy could ever want, but also a severe, lifelong case of germophobia. She's very scared of germs, and as she passes this along to young Howard, this is going to come up a lot. At 16, his mother dies during surgery while he's in Massachusetts at boarding school. And at 18, his father dies. The next year after that, he goes before a judge and convinces him that he should be allowed to buy out his uncle's share of his dad's company, the Hughes Tool Company. He becomes sole owner of the now just Hughes Tool Company. At 19, marries a socialite. They move to Hollywood, where Hughes' uncle Rupert, movie producer, introduces him around to all the bigwigs of the day, and they all call Hughes, behind his back, they call him the sucker with the money. But he gets obsessed with movies, spends nights dismantling film projectors. This is the way Howard Hughes fucking loved machines, and he would also get obsessed with things. This is also the period when he stops wearing a watch. He stops adhering to like a normal day-night kind of schedule. Instead, he'll work for maybe 40 hours straight, and then sleep. His first film project that he produces is called Swell Hogan. It's about like a Bowery hobo with a heart of gold. I think that was the deal. It was like a classic Bowery hobo story. Dime a dozen. We all love him. We all know him. Swell Hogan, though, it cost him $60,000. It's a big failure. Everybody hates it. Even using the classic Bowery hobo story with a heart of gold, classic formula. Somehow this movie fails. It does really bad. It cost him $60,000 in the end. Everybody in his life is telling him, you got to give up the movie business. You're clearly not cut out for it, but he ignores them, investing in a second movie called Everybody's Acting, which was a big success. And so at 21, he's a successful film producer. Howard Hughes, he produces The Racket in 1928 and writes, produces, and directs Hell's Angels in 1930, which is about two British fighter pilots in love with the same woman. But both of those are nominated for Best Pictures. And he also produced the original Scarface, which was based on Al Capone, of course, in 1932. The same year, Hughes founds the Hughes Aircraft Company, and he spent the next 2 decades alternately breaking various speed records and getting into horrific plane crashes. He already had one under his belt when he started the aircraft company, because he had crashed. Remember that movie we were talking about a minute ago, Hell's Angels? He had crashed Thomas More Scout while filming Hell's Angels. He walked away from his crash unhurt, and everybody was joking that at least he didn't hurt his check writing arm, which is hilarious. But then 2 other pilots did die in crashes on the movie. Such was flying in the 20s. I don't know if you've ever read about flying in the 20s, but I mean, good Lord, it was just, you're gonna die at some point, definitely. It's just a matter of when. It was like wingsuiting. I saw a Real Sports about wingsuiting one time. It was the most grim thing I've ever seen. It was this woman, and she loved wingsuiting, so she naturally she met other wingsuiters. So she would date wingsuiters, and all of her exes were flattened or wily coyoted out on boulders out in the desert. But it's an extreme sport. They're flying through rock formations and things, so they're constantly constantly dying. And this woman, I remember, was just like, I mean, yeah, that's what, I mean, I'm not going to not date a wingsuiter. So sure, my husbands are always probably going to die, but what am I going to do? Date some pussy who doesn't fly through the air like a flying squirrel? I ask you that, Barbara Walters. I don't think it was Barbara Walters, but would have been fun if it was. What was I talking about again? Oh yeah, the plane crashes. So he crashed the one while filming Hell's Angels. Then he crashed a plane called the Hughes Racer while setting a new speed record. Another one at Lake Mead in 1943 in a near fatal crash of the spy plane prototype, the Hughes XF-11. Crazy story. First time it was ever flown. Hughes pilots it himself. They make this and they're testing it. Hughes pilots it himself. Crashes it into Beverly Hills, destroys 3 houses, almost dies in the process. A Marine Corps Master Sergeant William Durkin pulled him from the flaming wreckage, and they said Hughes sent the guy a check for $200 every month for the rest of his life, which is a nice story. But they asked the guy's daughter about it, Durkin's daughter, and she was like, that's the first time hearing of it. I never heard of any monthly checks, but it would have been cool. But Hughes almost dies. It's very touch and go there for a minute, but he doesn't. He eventually fully recovers. Apparently, doctors, it was one of those that they were like, it's miraculous. He recovers. A second prototype is then built, and this is where the story gets insane. The second prototype is built of the Hughes XF-11. It's built and flown by Hughes again. He flies it successfully this time without crashing into a neighborhood in Beverly Hills. So one cheer for progress, for one reason, because the U.S. Army Air Force, as it was known at the time, insisted this time, if they're testing this plane again that just crashed into Beverly Hills, they say this time, y'all got to haul that shit out to the desert before you take it up. But they do. Hughes takes it up. He successfully flies it. It doesn't crash, which is a big victory for him, because he had to put down $5 million as sort of a security deposit to fly the plane. The U.S. Army Air Force was really against the idea of him doing the second test run. But he did it. That shows you, sons of bitches, for not believing in Howard Hughes just because he almost killed himself and destroyed 3 houses in Beverly Hills. The project is soon abandoned. It stood out as such a failure that there was an investigation about whether it was just a really stupid idea or something more nefarious going on. I think eventually they were just like, I think it was just a really stupid idea. In 1936, Hughes may or may not have intoxication manslaughtered a guy named Gabriel S. Meyer in L.A. Gabriel was standing at a streetcar stop, apparently, when Hughes hit him with his car. There was a witness who said Hughes was speeding and driving erratically when he hit Meyer, and the police said he wasn't drunk, but he had been drinking. He's booked on negligent homicide, but his lawyer gets him out pending a coroner's inquest. And before the coroner does his investigation, before the coroner even gets to that, the witness comes out and changes her story and says, actually, you know what happened was the guy walked out in front of the wealthy man. I had totally forgotten before, but the guy, he walked out in front of the wealthy man's car, and he yelled something about not wanting to live anymore, but he ran. The point is, he ran out there. There was nothing Howard Hughes could do, so, which is crazy, you know. I wonder what happened there. What could have happened there. So the passenger, who was with Hughes, backs up the changed story of the witness. She's like, yeah, that's exactly what happened. The coroner's inquest finds Hughes blameless, and he walks. Outside the courtroom, he tells reporters, quote, "I was driving slowly and a man stepped out of the darkness in front of me." So that settles that, ladies and gentlemen. Sounds innocent to me. His first wife had divorced him in 1929 after 4 years of marriage, and then he got married a second time in 1957 to the actress Jean Peters. They had met in the 40s, and they were on and off again for the next several decades. And when they weren't together, Hughes was having his personal spies follow her wherever she went. This was confirmed by the actor Max Showalter, who was in Niagara with Peters in 1953. They became good friends. And then Showalter said some guys showed up and told him they'd ruin him if he didn't stop hanging out with Peters. Remember that. Hughes suffers from obsessive compulsive disorder his whole life. He ate the same dinner every night, a New York strip steak, cooked medium rare, dinner salad, and peas, but he would only eat the smaller peas and push the larger ones to the side. 1956, Hughes produced The Conqueror. You might have heard about it. It's that one. It's the movie where John Wayne infamously plays Genghis Khan. It actually doesn't do bad commercially. Commercially, it does well. It even caused a riot in Berlin because people in East Berlin, there wasn't a wall up yet, and people in East Berlin were trying to rush past guards so they could go see The Conqueror. But it is a disaster in every other way besides commercially. It's regarded as one of the worst movies of all time. And if that weren't enough, they shot a lot of The Conqueror in the desert in Utah, just downwind from the government's Nevada National Security Site, where they tested nuclear bombs. Over 100 nuclear weapons tests were done in the area from 1951 to 1962. Producers knew about the tests, but the government assured them they were safe. But more than 40% of the 220 crew members who worked on the film had developed cancer, and 21% had died from it by 1980. In the end, Hughes was so ashamed of The Conqueror, he spends $12 million to buy up every copy, and then he holds on to them until his death, so no one else can see him. In his later years, that was one of two movies he became kind of obsessed with, and he would watch on loop, the other being Ice Station Zebra, a thriller about a nuclear submarine starring Ernest Borgnine and Jim Brown, which is cool. But when I first read Ice Station Zebra, that he was obsessed with Ice Station Zebra, I was picturing like a Pixar type of, like, I don't know, like a zebra who's working on like an Antarctic field station. I don't know. That's where my mind went. I thought it would be really fun if this is the movie that Howard Hughes is watching on loop as he's losing his mind. In 1957, Hughes tells his aides he wants to screen some movies at a studio near his house, and he ends up staying there for 4 months, eating only chicken and chocolate bars and drinking only milk. He was also surrounded by tissue boxes, in which he's constantly stacking and restacking. He's also naked this whole time. He wrote detailed memos to his staff during this time not to look at him or speak to him unless spoken to. He went in to the studio in winter of 1957 and didn't leave until spring of 1958. And when he does, he's a repulsive gremlin of a man. He hasn't bathed in a long time. He wasn't done sitting naked in a chair watching movies for weeks at a time either. When he gets out, he moved his whole team, including wife and girlfriends, to the Beverly Hills Hotel, where he mostly, again, sat naked in a chair with a pink hotel napkin draped over his dick and balls. He's watching movies, and now they think he had allodynia, a condition that causes normally painless sensations to be painful, like the way when you have a sunburn, like clothes can be painful. That's like having this is like that being all the time. So they think that's why he didn't care for clothes so much. Thus, the napkin. In 1 year, after moving into the Beverly Hills Hotel, it's estimated that he spent $11 million at the hotel. And nuclear tests, even after the Conqueror, they continued to be a real thorn in Hughes's ass. He eventually relocated to Las Vegas in the 1960s and moved into the Desert Inn. And then at the first sign of the staff, cramping his style with their puritanical rules about not leaving jars of urine everywhere, the first sign of that, he was like, actually, you know what? I'll just buy the hotel. I'll just take it. So he buys the hotel. He can keep as many urine jars around as he wants. And then he buys up several other hotel casinos, the Castaways, New Frontier, the Landmark, and the Sands. This is like 1966 through 68. There's a rumor that he bought the Silver Slipper Casino because the sign was right outside his window, like the bit with Kramer and the Kenny Rogers Roasters sign, like that bit, but with the Silver Slipper Casino. And they said he bought it just to take the sign down, but unfortunately that appears to just be a legend. But anyway, they're doing nuclear tests in the desert outside of Vegas. When he gets to Vegas, he can't help but notice his new hotel keeps shaking from the shockwaves from all the tests. So he authorizes his guys to give a $1 million bribe to President Johnson, and then later he's like, you can forward that offer to Nixon, but it never goes anywhere. This is also when the Mormon Mafia comes into the picture. They're Hughes's personal secret police, and under the leadership of the lead Mormon, William Frank Gay, they oversee a lot of Hughes's business interests in his last couple of decades. Gay also worked with the CIA in 1974 when they approached Hughes to help run cover for him when they tried to recover the sunken Soviet submarine. They knew they'd need a big-ass ship to recover nuclear sub, and they knew any big-ass ship would immediately draw the attention of the Soviets. So they reached out to Hughes to be their cover story. They get Hughes to say he's building a drilling ship through his company Global Marine Development to extract manganese nodules from the ocean floor. And you know where the best manganese nodules are? Or right where that fucking Soviet sub sank a little bit ago in 1968. They're off the coast of Oahu. Off the northwest coast of Oahu. It works. They they start pulling it up. And if you've ever played the crane game at CC's Pizza, you know what a bad feeling this is. As they're pulling it up, there's a problem with the grapple, and the grapple that's bringing the sub up from the ocean floor. And part of it like breaks off and falls back to the ocean floor, like 2/3 of it, in fact, taking with it like a lot of the shit that they were really hoping to get their hands on, including the code book and nuclear missiles. They did recover 2 nuclear-tipped torpedoes, some cryptographic machines, and 6 dead Soviet sailors who they then gave a burial at sea to. Reading about Howard Hughes, he really is he's like a super wealthy Forrest Gump type figure. He seemed to have a connection, to like every major news event of his lifetime, damn near. For instance, he's supposedly a key figure in the Watergate scandal. He had given Don Nixon a $205,000 loan at some point. And Nixon, in 1971, he's doing opposition research ahead of the 1972 election, and he's very worried that people might know about his dealings with Hughes. He's worried about a bribe Hughes paid to a friend of his named Bebe Rebozo. Great name, Bebe Rebozo. One of Don Nixon's sources, who they're getting the Oppo information from, is a former business advisor to Hughes named John H. Meyer, who is working with former DNC chairman and soon-to-be NBA commissioner and namesake of the NBA championship trophy himself, Larry O'Brien. So Meyer is telling Don Nixon, oh my God, they're onto you. They're definitely going to look into you and Howard Hughes. They know all about you guys, and they think like this is what motivates the break-in eventually at Watergate, is Nixon trying to find out what these guys know about Hughes and other similar supporters, if you will. The last few years of Hughes's life, he lived almost exclusively at the Xanadu Beach Resort and Marina in the Bahamas, which was built in 1968 and then bought by Hughes in 1972. Hughes died in 1976 of kidney failure while on a flight from the Acapulco Princess Hotel to the Methodist Hospital in Houston. And he was so malnourished when he died. He's down to 90 pounds. He's so unrecognizable that they had to fingerprint him to confirm his ID. The cops did. Down to 90 pounds, which is crazy because he's 6'4". And an X-ray found the ends of 5 hypodermic needles broken off in his arm from his decades of injecting codeine using brittle, old-timey glass syringes, which apparently the needles would break off from really easily. Pretty gross detail, but I had to read it, so y'all gotta hear about it. That's it for our Cavalcade of Rich Weirdos. Thank y'all as always for joining me. Like, comment, subscribe, follow, all that good shit. Like I said, we're putting out new shit every day on Instagram. We got a lot of exciting stuff coming up. No time for a Greek myth of the week. I got too into the Rich Weirdos this week and slacked on my Edith Hamilton, so I apologize both to you and to her for that. Anyway, I don't really even have much news. I don't have much going on. I've just been doing shows around here in North Texas, hanging out with my girl, watching the Larry Sanders Show. Hey now. I had a really good burger this week. That's kind of newsy. I had a really top-notch cheeseburger from Maple and Motor. But Maple and Motor, shout out. It's a damn fine burger. We love you, Maple and Motor. This is not a paid ad. Again, this is just a really good burger. I have a picture of it too I can throw up on the thing later. Really bring the story to life with a photograph. The story of of a good burger, of the burger I had. But hey, I do think I think y'all appreciate it. You'll see what I mean. It's a good burger. You could tell it comes across in the picture. Later in the same day, actually, as that I got the burger. I was driving down Northwest Highway here in Dallas. I get behind a Waymo. You know those robot cars? We're turning right there on 75 onto the highway. The Waymo's in front of me. The Waymo just stops. It just stops for like a long time. It was very annoying. At one point, I go, robot asshole. And then the thing it did. It was just a brief thing. It was very frustrating, and yet at the same time it was like, wow, I guess the future really is here, you know. It's pretty cool. It makes me wonder what exciting new technology I might be cursing at next, you know, which is pretty cool to think about. But anyway, ladies and gentlemen, that is our episode. Thank y'all for joining us. Thanks for hanging out with me. I'll see y'all next time. Until then, we love you all. Au revoir.
Got digging through the past. Crazy tales they uncover fast. History's stranger than you think. They'll also talk about wieners in a blink. They'll talk about wieners in a blink. Oddball history.